The day snow blanketed the backyard. My stepmother smiled. "Let's make angels." Behind the shed, the memory turned bitter, her smile freezing over like ice. Years later, that same smile appeared on her face as she stood before my father's company logo, now hers. They called it the Snow Day Summit of Winterbridge Logistics. I called it the day an angel would return. But this time, it would be mine. My name is Ivy Calder. I am 29 years old, and I have returned to a town I swore I would never see again. The snow is falling on Halcyon Ridge tonight, a thick, determined curtain of white that muffles the world. It's a stage manager's snow, the kind that demands silence and attention, burying the hard, ugly edges of everything beneath a veneer of purity. From the porch of the house I grew up in, the only sound that cuts through the quiet is the distant, grinding groan of a snowplow clearing Main Street, its diesel engine a monstrous heartbeat in the cold. Yellow streetlights bleed onto the accumulating drifts, casting long, distorted shadows that writhe like memories. The air is so cold it feels solid in my lungs, a sharp, crystalline ache with every breath. My gaze is fixed on the old shed at the edge of the backyard, its wood weathered to a soft, forgiving gray. And there, on one of the planks, just below the rusted latch, is the faint impression of a hand, a small hand, fingers splayed wide, pressed into the wood during a long-ago summer when the paint was still fresh and tacky. My handprint, a fossil of a life that no longer feels like my own. It is a ghost, and tonight, it has called me back. The cold seeps through my coat, a familiar chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. It's the cold of remembrance. The scene plays out in my mind not like a faded film, but with the sharp, brutal clarity of something that happened only yesterday. I was 8. The snow was just like this. A pristine canvas. Marla Vale, my father's new wife, had a smile that could melt glaciers. It was bright and wide and promised warmth. "Ivy, darling," she called from the kitchen window, her voice like warm honey. "It's a perfect snow day. Let's go make angels." An angel. The word was magic to an 8-year-old girl who still believed in such things. I pulled on my boots, my heart thumping with the simple, uncomplicated joy of a child offered a treat. She met me at the back door, already zipped into a stylish white ski jacket, her blonde hair a perfect helmet against the flurries. She took my mittened hand, her grip surprisingly firm, and led me past the patio. "Not here," she said, her smile unwavering. "The neighbors can see everything from their dining room. Let's go behind the shed. It's our secret spot." A secret. The word was a hook. Behind the shed, the wind was cut off, and the world shrank to just the two of us, the gray wood and the deep, untouched snow. I was ready to fall back, to sweep my arms and legs through the powder and create something beautiful. But we never made angels. The moment we were hidden from view, her smile didn't so much disappear as it did curdle. It tightened at the edges, the warmth retracting into a cool, brittle mask of impatience. "Your father thinks these little games are important," she said, her voice losing its honeyed tone, becoming flat and businesslike. "He thinks we need to bond. So, we will bond." She gestured vaguely at the snow with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Go on, then. Play. I'll watch for 5 minutes." I stood there, confused. The magic was gone, replaced by a bewildering sense of transaction. I picked up the cheap, bright red plastic shovel I'd left by the woodpile. I scooped some snow, trying to recapture the feeling of fun, of a game. I offered it to her, a clumsy invitation. "We can build something." She looked at the plastic shovel as if it were something filthy. "Don't be ridiculous. Ivy, I'm not a child." Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all her worldly burdens, she took the shovel from me. For a moment, I thought she might relent, might actually play along. Instead, she turned and, with a single sharp motion, snapped it over her knee. The crack of the plastic was loud and violent in the stillness. She dropped the 2 pieces at my feet. "This is what happens to cheap things," she said, her eyes as cold as the air. "They break. Remember that." She turned and walked away, her boots leaving perfect, neat impressions in the snow. She left me standing there, behind the shed, with the broken pieces of my toy and the sudden, gut-wrenching understanding that I was a cheap thing, an inconvenience, an obligation to be managed. I stumbled backward, falling into the deep drift where my angel was supposed to be. A mouthful of snow, shockingly cold, tasted sharp and metallic, the flavor of utter disillusionment. That was the first crack in the perfect family portrait my father had tried so desperately to paint. It was the day I learned that a smile could be a weapon, and an angel could be a lie. Now, years later, the snow falls on a different scene, but the lie remains. Marla Vale is no longer just my father's wife. My father, Harold Calder, the titan who built Winterbridge Logistics from a single truck into the largest freight carrier in the Northeast, now lies in a quiet room in a private clinic, silenced by a massive stroke. And in his place, Marla reigns. She is the acting CEO, a position she assumed with an efficiency that felt less like grief and more like a coronation. Tonight is the annual Snow Day Summit, a ridiculously named corporate gala Marla invented to celebrate the company's winter weather resilience. It's a festival of self-congratulation, held in a massive, heated marquee on the company headquarters lawn. I watch it all unfold on a live stream, the irony a bitter pill. On the giant LED screen behind the stage, Marla stands at the podium, bathed in a soft blue light. She is radiant, poised, the very picture of a grieving wife stepping up to honor her husband's legacy. Her smile is the same one from all those years ago, bright, wide, and promising warmth to an audience that doesn't know any better. My husband, Harold, always said that a storm isn't a challenge, it's an opportunity, she says, her voice resonating with practiced sincerity. An opportunity to show our strength, our grit. And so, I say to all of you, the heart and soul of Winterbridge, today is a day for making angels. A wave of polite, appreciative laughter ripples through the crowd of employees and stakeholders. They see a charming metaphor, a clever bit of branding from their charismatic leader. They don't see what I see. They don't see the shadow of a little girl standing behind a shed. They don't hear the crack of breaking plastic. They don't understand that for Marla, an angel is not a symbol of innocence, but a code for something secret, something hidden from view. My hand is steady as I lift my phone. I zoom in on her face on the screen, that perfect predatory smile filling my display. The camera clicks, capturing the image with digital precision. I open the photo, the pixels sharp and clear. I save the file. The name comes to me instantly, a whisper from the past given a new, cold purpose. Angel.png. It's the first of many, the beginning of a collection. Because as I stand here on this cold porch, the ghost of my child self shivering beside me, I make a promise. This time, the secrets buried in the snow will be brought into the light. The cheap things are about to break. I whisper the words into the freezing air, my breath a fleeting cloud of white. Every angel has wings of evidence. Winterbridge Logistics does not exist in Halcyon Ridge. My father built his empire in Westvale, the next town over, where the land is flatter and the taxes are lower. It's a monument of steel and smoked glass, a 20-story middle finger to the sky that catches the winter sun and shatters it into a million cold, glittering pieces. It's a building that makes a statement. We are efficient. We are transparent. We are untouchable. From the highway, You can see the name in clean, silver letters. Winterbridge. It was my father's life's work. A legacy forged from diesel fumes, asphalt, and relentless ambition. Harold Calder was a visionary, a man who saw the intricate dance of commerce in the ballet of 18-wheelers on an interstate. He built Winterbridge from the ground up. But he was a creator, not an enforcer. He loved the big picture, the grand strategy, the handshake deals that built relationships. He was not a man for spreadsheets or painful cuts. That's where Marla came in. She arrived a decade ago, not as a blushing bride, but as a prospective chief financial officer with a resume as sharp as a shard of ice and a reputation for what the board admiringly called iron discipline. My father was captivated. She was the order to his chaos, the ruthless pragmatism that would temper his expansive dreams. Their marriage felt less like a romance and more like a merger. She became Marla Vale Calder, and Winterbridge Logistics gained its executioner. You can see the merger immortalized in the main lobby. There's a family portrait, a massive, professionally lit photograph that hangs opposite the reception desk. It's supposed to convey warmth, stability, heritage. My father is in the center, looking proud and robust, a king in his castle. Marla is beside him, her hand resting on his arm, a portrait of elegant devotion. Her son from a previous marriage, a blandly handsome boy named Julian, stands slightly behind her, smiling a vacant, polished smile. And then there is me. I am on the far left of the frame, positioned just slightly off-center, as if I were a late addition to the composition. The photographer, no doubt following Marla's precise instructions, lit me differently. The key light on my father and Marla is warm, inviting. The light on me is cooler, dimmer by at least half a stop. It's a subtle thing, a detail most people would never notice, but I see it every time. I am a part of the picture, but I am not part of the light. I am an asset that has been accounted for, filed away in a corner of the frame. The irony is that this carefully constructed image is the company's greatest asset. A recent press release, issued just after my father's stroke, read, "In these trying times, we draw strength from our foundation. The Winterbridge family has always been, and will continue to be, a moral cornerstone of the Halcyon Ridge community, committed to integrity, transparency, and service." A moral cornerstone. I had to read the sentence twice to make sure it wasn't satire. Because inside the glass tower, the whispers told a different story. Marla's tenure as CFO was marked by what the veterans on the loading docks called the Winter Purge. It was a systematic campaign of austerity. She renegotiated supplier contracts with brutal, take-it-or-leave-it terms. She slashed overtime, cut contributions to the pension fund, and outsourced the entire janitorial staff to a low-bid contractor, eliminating 24 long-term employees with full benefits. Each move was framed in the language of fiscal responsibility. "We are trimming the fat to ensure a lean and healthy future," she would announce in company-wide emails. But to the people whose livelihoods were the fat, it was a slow, cold bleeding. My father, caught up in his vision of expansion, either didn't see the full extent of the damage she was doing to company morale, or he chose not to. He trusted her judgment. He trusted his partner. That trust was his undoing. His stroke was not a random act of biology. It was a strategically timed event. It happened on March 31st, the final day of the first fiscal quarter, the day the books had to be closed, the accounts reconciled, and the quarterly bonus payments and major contractor invoices approved and signed. I was in Chicago when I got the call. The world tilted on its axis. But while I was frantically booking a flight home, Marla was the picture of calm control. She was at the office, with my father incapacitated. The company bylaws were clear. The CFO had signatory authority. As the paramedics were still working on my father, Marla Vale Calder was sitting in his office, with his pen, signing off on every single payment for the quarter. A seamless transition of power, executed with breathtaking precision. I never intended to come back. Not really. After college, I left Halcyon Ridge and its suffocating memories in the rearview mirror. I built a career for myself in Chicago as a supply chain logistics consultant. I specialized in untangling the very kinds of complex networks my father had built. I was good at it because I understood how things were supposed to move, and more importantly, how they could be broken. I kept my distance from Winterbridge, limiting my interactions to polite holiday calls and the occasional, strained family dinner when I was back in town. The company was my father's world, and after Marla's arrival, it was a world that had no real place for me. Then, about a month ago, a document appeared in my inbox. It was from an old friend, a mid-level analyst in the Winterbridge accounting department, with a simple, unsigned message. Thought you should see this. Something's not right. It was a supplementary payroll report, a list of payments to independent contractors for emergency weather services. My eyes scanned the columns. Contractor codes I didn't recognize. Invoices that were perfectly sequential. Payment amounts that were consistently just below the threshold that would trigger an automatic secondary audit. To anyone else, it would have looked like boring, routine paperwork. To me, it was a symphony of red flags. The data was too clean, too perfect. Real-world logistics are messy. Invoices get submitted late. Codes get mistyped. Amounts vary. This was pristine. It was a lie. Beautifully formatted in an Excel spreadsheet. It was the loose thread. And despite every instinct telling me to stay away, I knew I had to pull it. Which is how I found myself sitting at the enormous mahogany dining table in my father's house 2 weeks ago, for my first family dinner since the stroke. The scene was a masterpiece of denial. Marla played the role of the beleaguered but resilient matriarch perfectly. She spoke in hushed, somber tones about my father's condition, about the brave face she had to put on for the company. Julian, her son, nodded along, offering platitudes about strength and recovery. "We just held the silent auction for the children's hospital wing," Marla said, delicately dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "We raised over $200,000. Harold would have been so proud." She smiled. The same smile from the gala, the same smile from behind the shed. It was a performance, and she was the star. I let her talk. I nodded in all the right places. But as she recounted her philanthropic triumphs, my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't listening to her words. I was listening to the data. The spreadsheet was burned into my memory. As she named the catering company for the auction, I was mentally cross-referencing it against the list of approved vendors. As she mentioned the new security firm for the Westvale headquarters, I was searching for their contractor code in my head. And as she talked about the heroic efforts of the snow removal crews during the last blizzard, a series of unfamiliar names echoed in my thoughts. Halo Haulage Inc., Cherub Clearance Co., Angel Plows LLC. The names were almost comically innocuous, but they weren't on the official Winterbridge roster. They were ghosts in the machine, and their payments had all been approved on March 31st, signed, sealed, and delivered by the woman sitting across from me, telling the world what a good person she was. I picked up my wine glass, the crystal cool against my fingers. I met her gaze over the rim. She held my look for a fraction of a second, her smile never wavering. But I saw it. A flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear. Not yet. Annoyance. The cold, dismissive irritation of a queen who has just noticed a fly in her banquet hall. She had no idea that the fly had already found the rot in her perfect, gilded feast. My proposal was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, delivered over lukewarm coffee in Marla's glass-walled office. I framed it as a daughter's concern, a professional's offer of assistance. With Dad out of commission and this unpredictable weather, the supply chain is vulnerable, I said, my voice modulated to convey earnest sincerity. I could come on as a temporary consultant, just for the storm season, an extra set of eyes on the operational logistics, to help ensure everything runs smoothly. It's what Dad would want. For a moment, she studied me, her blue eyes analytical, searching for the angle. I could see the calculations running behind her serene facade. To refuse would look suspicious, like she had something to hide. To accept was to bring me inside, but in a capacity she could control. I was the grieving daughter, not a threat. A consultant could be managed, given a desk in a remote corner and fed meaningless busywork. She saw a PR win, the family, united in crisis. I saw a keycard and a network login. That's very thoughtful of you, Ivy, she finally said, her smile returning. Of course. We'd be grateful for the support. My desk was, as predicted, in a corporate no man's land on the 4th floor, a sterile cubicle between human resources and marketing. I was given access to the company's integrated logistics platform and the general ledger, a vast digital ocean of data. Marla assumed I would be tracing shipping routes and monitoring fuel costs. And I was. But I was doing it at night, long after the office had emptied. Using my legitimate access as a key to unlock doors I was never meant to open. The first few nights were a blur of numbers. I cross-referenced vendor payments against work orders, fuel receipts against GPS-logged mileage, and overtime claims against driver logs. It was all meticulously clean, a testament to Marla's iron discipline. But the spreadsheet from my contact was my Rosetta Stone. It pointed me toward the emergency contingency budget, a discretionary fund that CFOs love for its opacity, and deep within its subledgers, under line items for a brutal blizzard that hit in late February, I found them. They weren't obvious. They were coded, alphanumeric strings that meant nothing on their own. But a pattern emerged. A specific prefix, followed by a 2-digit number, Angel 12, Angel 31, Angel 44. Each was attached to a significant 5-figure payment. The memo field for each transaction was identical. Tier 1 priority snow removal. It was her signature, hidden in plain sight, an inside joke she thought only she would ever get. The codes corresponded to 3 different vendors, Angel Plows, LLC, Halo Haulage, Inc., and Cherub Clearance Co. The names were so saccharine, so perfectly on theme. It was almost laughable. I ran a corporate search. All 3 were registered within the last 18 months. All 3 listed different principals, different registered agents, but they had one thing in common: their mailing address. It wasn't a physical office, but a single P.O. box in a strip mall in Westvale, located less than a mile from the Winterbridge headquarters. 3 separate, critical, high-priority contractors, all apparently operating out of the same small metal box at a postal annex. That was the hook. The next step was to dissect the transactions themselves. I pulled the full invoice packages for the February blizzard, the storm that had shut down the entire tri-state area for 48 hours. The invoices from the Angel companies were perfect. They detailed hourly rates, equipment used, salt tonnage deployed, and routes cleared. They were works of fiction, but they were internally consistent. The problem wasn't in the documents themselves, but in the metadata. I looked at the payment timestamps in the accounting system. The wire transfer to Angel Plows, LLC for $85,000 was initiated at 11:53 p.m. on February 19th. The payment to Halo Haulage for $92,000 went out at 11:58 p.m., the same night. I pulled up the archived meteorological data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The first flakes of the February blizzard, the storm these companies were supposedly paid to combat, didn't begin to fall in Westvale until 4:17 a.m. on February 20th. Marla had paid them in full, for a job they hadn't done, nearly 5 hours before the storm even began. She wasn't paying for a service, she was moving money under the cover of an approaching storm. This discovery led me deeper, into the company's internal email server. I searched for weather-related communications in the days leading up to the storm. I found a chain between Marla and the head of operations. The initial email, sent on February 18th, contained an attachment, the official NWS forecast, predicting a manageable 6 to 8 inches of snow. But a second email, sent by Marla a day later, contained a different version of that same forecast. The file name was nearly identical, but the contents were not. This one predicted a catastrophic 18 to 24 inches, a historic blizzard that would require preemptive, emergency resource allocation. I checked the document properties. The PDF's metadata showed it was created and modified by M. Vale just minutes before she forwarded it. She hadn't just used the storm as cover. She had digitally exaggerated its threat to justify her preemptive fraud. The final piece of the puzzle was connecting the money not just to the company, but directly to her. The 3 angel companies were LLCs, designed to obscure ownership. But even shell corporations have to be funded, have to be created by someone. It took me 2 days and a subscription to a deep-dive corporate record service I used in my consulting work. But I found it. The incorporating documents for all 3 LLCs were signed by the same person, a lawyer specializing in trust and estate planning. And the initial capitalization for each entity came from a single source, the Halcyon Dawn Trust. My blood ran cold when I saw the name. It sounded benevolent, hopeful. Another one of her sick jokes. I pulled the trust's filings. It was an irrevocable trust, a complex legal instrument designed for maximum anonymity and asset protection. The beneficiaries were not named directly, but the trustee, the individual with sole signatory power and complete control over the funds, was not. It was Marla Vale Calder. She wasn't just the CFO approving the payments, she was the architect of the phantom companies receiving them. She was both the poacher and the gamekeeper. I opened a new, encrypted spreadsheet on my personal laptop. I created 2 sets of columns. On the left, I entered the data from the Winterbridge ledger. Invoice number, vendor name, payment amount, payment timestamp. I filled it in with the details for Angel 12, Angel 31, and Angel 44. On the right, I began building the truth. I pulled the official municipal snowplow logs for the town of Westvale for the night of the blizzard. I downloaded satellite imagery from the morning after, which clearly showed which industrial park roads, the very routes the angel companies claimed to have cleared, were still covered in deep, untouched snow. The picture became brutally, beautifully clear. The snow was real. The trucks Winterbridge owned were real. The money was real. But the service was a ghost. Marla had created a phantom fleet, an angelic host that existed only on paper, and paid them millions of dollars to plow roads that were never touched. She had found a way to bleed her husband's company dry, using the very force of nature that was supposed to be its greatest challenge as her greatest cover. My spreadsheet wasn't an accounting document anymore. It was a map of a crime, and every cell, every data point, was a nail I was about to hammer into her perfectly constructed world. The angel invoices were the map, but they led to a dead end. The routes they listed were real: industrial parks, access roads to the interstate, a few commercial lots. The fraud was in the service never being rendered, but proving a negative is a ghost hunt. I needed more. I needed to connect the phantom work to a physical place, a moment in time that was undeniably real. I started cross-referencing the priority routes listed on the invoices with Winterbridge's own operational history, looking for an anomaly, and I found one. Tucked into dozens of invoices from Angel Plows LLC was a recurring charge for a short, insignificant residential street, Aspen Lane, my old street. It made no logistical sense. Winterbridge trucks had no business there. It wasn't a through street and served no commercial purpose. It was a dead-end road leading to a dozen suburban houses. Why would Marla's phantom company be plowing my old street and billing the corporation for it? The question sent me digging into a different kind of archive, far from Winterbridge's pristine servers. The Halcyon County Public Records Portal was a clunky, outdated system, a digital graveyard of zoning permits and land surveys. I was looking for something specific, aerial or satellite imagery, for tax assessment and infrastructure planning. The county occasionally commissioned drone surveys, especially after major weather events. I filtered by date, starting with the winter 21 years ago, the year of the broken shovel. It took hours. The files were massive, unindexed TIFFs with bureaucratic names. I was about to give up when I found a folder labeled Post-Storm Assessment, Project W2B, Pilot Program. Inside was a high-resolution drone survey map of the entire county, dated the morning after that specific snow day. Project W2B. I had a sickening feeling I knew what the W stood for. I found Aspen Lane and zoomed in. The image was stark black and white, the world reduced to shadow and snow. The drone had captured it all with dispassionate clarity. The houses, the snow-laden trees, the single set of tire tracks from the morning paper delivery. And there, in the official county legend at the bottom of the image, was the project description: Winterbridge Logistics Residential Plowing Pilot Program. My father had never mentioned a residential pilot program. It was a ghost project, a line item in a forgotten budget. Marla must have created it, a way to extend the company's reach, her reach, into our very neighborhood, under the guise of community outreach or R&D. And as my eyes scanned the image, they snagged on something behind my old house, behind the shed. The resolution was just high enough. It wasn't a clear picture, but it was an undeniable record. 2 figures, captured as long, distorted shadows on the snow. One was tall and slender, the other was small, child-sized. Around them, the pristine snow was a mess of chaotic footprints and scuffs, and a single, sweeping arc where an angel was never made. The drone, flying its sterile grid pattern hundreds of feet in the air, had accidentally documented the moment. It had captured the lie. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it. The intersection of the personal and the corporate. The origin story of the angel. I went back to the Winterbridge archives, this time searching for records from that specific year. I looked for board meeting minutes, operational reports, anything mentioning a pilot program. I found it in the minutes of a quarterly operations review meeting. A single, dismissive line item. Minor incident involving a child during residential pilot program on Aspen Lane. Matter handled internally to maintain community goodwill. The signatory at the bottom of the page, approving the minutes, was Marla. She had not only created the program that put a Winterbridge-sanctioned operation on our street, she had documented and buried the incident herself, framing it as a corporate nuisance she had graciously contained. The pieces began to slide into place with terrifying speed. The Aspen Lane pilot route was the blueprint. It was the original sin. It was the first time she had used the cover of snow and the resources of Winterbridge to enact her own private agenda. The angel invoices weren't just about stealing money, they were a continuation of a system she had perfected years ago, using the company to sanitize her secrets. I needed to know if this was a pattern. I tracked down 2 former Winterbridge security guards who had been on the Westvale night shift for years. I met them at a dingy diner miles from town, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and grease. The first, a man named Sal, was hesitant until I slid a $100 bill across the table. "I remember her," he said, his eyes flicking nervously toward the door. "The CFO, real particular. We had a protocol for heavy snow nights, a verbal order, never in writing. We were to disable the CCTV cameras covering the south side loading bays and the back perimeter fence. Said the ice and wind could damage the lenses, and it was cheaper to turn them off than to replace them. That doesn't make any sense, I said. That's when you'd need them the most. Tell me about it. The other guard, a younger man named Mike, chimed in. We always thought it was weird. The official log would say, weather interference. But we were the ones who switched them off. Always on nights with big storms. Always on her order. The South Side Bays. The exact area where snow removal contractors would stage their equipment. She wasn't just hiding her cruelty. She was hiding her crimes. Using the same excuse, the snow, every single time. My next call was to the warehouse foreman at the main depot. A man named George who had worked for my father for 30 years. I asked him about equipment procurement, specifically about small tools, like shovels. Funny you should ask about that, he said, his voice raspy over the phone. I remember one year, must be 21 years ago, we got a huge shipment of these bright red plastic shovels, cheap things, for clearing walkways and such. A month later, we got a directive straight from the CFO's office. All shovels from that specific batch were to be collected and disposed of, immediately. Was there a safety recall? I asked, my breath catching in my throat. That's what the memo said. Potential for material fracture under sub-zero conditions. But we'd hardly used them. They were practically new. We swapped them all out, though. Orders are orders. I thanked him and hung up. My hand trembling. I went to the closet in my old bedroom, to a box tucked away in the far back corner. A box of things that didn't fit into my new life, but that I could never bear to throw away. Underneath old yearbooks and concert ticket stubs was a small, cloth-wrapped object. I unwrapped it carefully. It was a jagged piece of red plastic, about 4 inches long, the edge sharp and uneven, the piece of the shovel she had broken. I had picked it up out of the snow that day and kept it. A secret, ugly relic. It took another full day of searching the digital archives, but I finally found the procurement receipt for that batch of shovels, and on it, printed in faded dot matrix font, was the manufacturer's lot number, K88B1. Then I found the disposal order, signed by Marla, referencing the same lot number. She hadn't just broken my shovel. She had used the full power of the corporation to erase the existence of the specific model, to recall and destroy every single identical one, burying the evidence of her small act of cruelty under the weight of corporate procedure. It was the most thorough, psychopathic tidying up I had ever seen. The shard of plastic in my hand felt heavy, no longer just a piece of a broken toy, but a key. It was physical proof, a direct link from her to that moment, validated by a chain of corporate paperwork she herself had created. I returned to the drone photo on my screen, the black and white image of the shadows in the snow. This was the anchor. This was where it all began. The financial fraud, the cover-ups, the lies. It all radiated outward from this one small, cold moment behind a shed. I clicked Save As. My fingers moved across the keyboard, typing a new name for the file, a name that would be the cornerstone of everything to come. Angel Evid 1 TIFF. The first exhibit was officially entered into evidence. The storm that hit on the night of the Snow Day Summit was a gift from the gods of vengeance. It wasn't in the forecast. A sudden, violent squall that blew in off the Atlantic, dumping 6 inches of wet, heavy snow in under an hour. It snarled traffic, downed power lines, and provided the perfect, unimpeachable excuse. I found Marla backstage, a whirlwind of calm command amidst the manufactured chaos of the event. She was speaking to a stage manager, her voice low and firm, her public smile momentarily packed away. I approached her with an expression of manufactured urgency. "Marla, we have a situation," I said, keeping my voice just loud enough for her to hear over the muffled sound of the jazz band in the main marquee. "The flash storm. The municipal plows are overwhelmed. Our primary distribution hubs are getting blocked in. We're looking at significant delays by morning." She turned to me, her eyes sharp with annoyance, a flaw in her perfect evening. "So? Dispatch the emergency crews. That's what the contingency plan is for." "Exactly," I said, leaning in, selling the pitch I had rehearsed 100 times. "And this is the perfect opportunity. You're about to give a speech about Winterbridge's resilience. What if we did more than just talk about it? What if we showed them, live, right here, right now?" A flicker of interest cut through her irritation. "What are you talking about?" "I've been developing a new system," I lied smoothly. "A dynamic, transparent bidding platform for emergency contracts. We can put out an immediate, high-priority call for supplemental snow clearance for the main hubs. We can project the live bidding process onto the main screen as it happens. It's a real-time demonstration of our agility and our commitment to fiscal transparency. You won't just be the CEO who weathered the storm, you'll be the innovator who mastered it. It's a PR masterstroke." I had baited the hook with her two favorite things, the appearance of innovation and the performance of transparency. I could see the idea taking root. Her mind instantly calculating the optics. She would be the hero, solving a crisis live on stage. "A live bidding system? We don't have anything like that," she said, her skepticism a final, feeble defense. "We do now," I replied, holding up my tablet. "It's a beta I designed. We can launch it tonight. A pilot program, born out of necessity. The board will love the initiative." She was silent for a long moment. "Fine," she said, the word clipped and final. "But this is your project, Ivy. If it fails, it's on you." She turned back to the stage manager. "Get a technical liaison to coordinate with Ivy. I want the feed ready to go on the main screen in 20 minutes. She never once asked how the system worked. She didn't care. She only saw the stage. I retreated to a small, curtained-off tech area I had already commandeered. My laptop was open, connected to a secure, encrypted line. On the other end, working from his apartment in Chicago, was Leo, the best freelance cybersecurity analyst I knew. A message from him was waiting on the screen. "And the honeypot is live. The platform is a closed loop. It looks real, but it only goes where we want it to. The bid packages are loaded, waiting for the birds to come home." I typed back. "Going live in 20. I'm bringing in the audience. Stand by to track the email." My next stop was a table near the front of the marquee where two of the company's longest-serving board members were seated, Arthur Sterling and Eleanor Albright. Both were my father's appointments. Old-school business people who valued stability and reputation above all else. They had been polite but distant since my return, clearly wary of the new regime. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Albright," I said, approaching with a confident smile. "Marla has asked me to give you a private demonstration of a new integrity protocol we're testing tonight. A live look at our new transparent bidding process. Given your positions on the audit committee, I thought you would want to see it firsthand." Their interest was piqued. The word integrity had been in short supply at Winterbridge lately. I led them back to my tech station, where I had 2 extra monitors set up. As you know, emergency contracts can be a significant point of vulnerability for fraud. I explained, my voice calm and professional. This system ensures that all bids are received through a secure portal, logged in real time, and awarded based on a transparent, preset algorithm. We're about to push out an emergency tender for the storm tonight. You can watch the entire process unfold right here. They nodded, impressed by the apparent professionalism. They had no idea they weren't watching a demo. They were witnessing a sting operation. On stage, Marla was at the podium, basking in the applause. I watched her on one of my monitors as Leo initiated the next phase. Bait is in the water. The bid tender email has been sent to the contact addresses for our 3 angels. The embedded tracker is active. In public, Marla had agreed to my plan. But I knew she would never allow a truly open bidding process to threaten her lucrative phantom contracts. Her greed and her arrogance were the linchpins of my entire trap. She would want to control the outcome. On the stage, she spoke glowingly of Winterbridge's readiness. And in a moment, you will all see a live demonstration of that very principle in action, a new system my stepdaughter, Ivy, has so brilliantly implemented. I watched the server logs on my main screen. The email had been delivered. 1 second passed. 2, 3. We have a ping. The email has been opened. My eyes darted to another window on my screen, a network traffic analysis tool. It was tracking the origin of the click. Got it. The link was opened from an IP address registered to the Winterbridge Executive Network, specifically, the hard-lined Ethernet port in the CFO's office. She's not even trying to hide. She was sitting on the stage, in front of hundreds of people, while a computer in her office, likely being operated remotely, accessed the fraudulent bid. But that was only half of the confirmation I needed. She would need to approve the transaction, and she wouldn't do that from a company network. That would be too clumsy. Backstage, out of sight of the main audience but visible to me on a security camera feed, I had looped to my tablet. Marla discreetly took out her personal cell phone. She glanced at it for a moment, her thumb moving quickly across the screen. On my monitor, a new alert flashed. Second login to the bidding portal. Different credentials. User ID is ValeOps. It's a secondary account, not her official one. And I have the IP. It's from a mobile device, routed through a major LTE carrier. The GPS triangulation is approximate, but it's originating from within a 50-meter radius of this building. She's doing it right now. My heart was a cold, steady drum. I glanced at Sterling and Albright. They were watching the main bidding screen, which was still just a placeholder graphic, waiting for the system to officially open. The system will go live for public bids in 1 minute. I told them, my voice betraying nothing. We'll see the proposals populate in real time. But we didn't have to wait a minute. 90 seconds after Leo had sent the email, a new entry suddenly appeared on the screen. It was a fully formed bid, complete with pricing, equipment allocation, and service guarantees. Well, that was fast, Sterling remarked, impressed. Someone was prepared. Impossibly fast, I said quietly. I pointed to the screen. The winning bid is from a contractor called Angel Plows, LLC. Albright squinted at the details. Their price is 20% below the next lowest competitor. That's very aggressive. It is, I said. It's almost as if they knew the tender was coming before it was even announced. The system I'd built wasn't just a bidding platform, it was a digital vault, logging every single interaction. I brought up a new window, displaying the server logs in a clean, easy-to-read format for my audience of 2. As you can see, I said, my finger tracing the lines of code on the screen. The bid from Angel Plows was submitted at 9:14 p.m. and 22 seconds. The system, however, was not officially opened for public bidding until 9:16 p.m. Sterling leaned closer, his brow furrowed. How is that possible? Before I could answer, a final alert chimed softly from my laptop. It was a notification from the third-party payment processor I had linked to the platform, another shell company I'd set up through Leo. Payment guarantee received. Amount, $25,000. Originating account, the Halcyon Dawn Trust. Transaction ID, 88A4B1F3 9C0D. The trap had snapped shut. I had it all. The impossible timing of the bid, the IP address from her office and the IP address from her phone, the use of a secret secondary account. And now, the money itself, a direct electronic transfer from her personal slush fund, sent to secure a fraudulent contract before the ink was even dry. On the stage, Marla was finishing her speech to a wave of thunderous applause. She was smiling that brilliant, angelic smile, a conquering hero. She had no idea that in a small, dark corner backstage, her entire empire had just turned to dust. The applause was a tidal wave, washing over Marla as she stood at the podium, a triumphant statue carved from light and confidence. It was the crescendo of her performance, the moment of absolute victory, and it was the perfect moment for me to walk on stage. I moved with a quiet purpose that cut through the noise. A few people in the front row turned to look, their expressions shifting from adoration to curiosity. The stage manager took a step forward to intercept me, but I gave him a small, authoritative shake of my head. I was Ivy Calder. I belonged here. Marla's smile tightened when she saw me. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but I saw it. The warmth receded, replaced by the cold glint of annoyance. I was an unscheduled part of the program. "Ivy," she said into the microphone, her voice a smooth, indulgent purr. "Joining me to celebrate. I see." The audience chuckled, a warm, appreciative sound. They thought it was a touching family moment. "I'm here to present the final results of the bidding demonstration," I said, my voice even and clear. I didn't address her. I addressed the room. I walked to the podium, took the secondary HDMI cable the technicians had left for me, and plugged it into my tablet. If you could all direct your attention to the main screen. Marla had no choice but to step aside. To protest would be to admit something was wrong. She stood next to me, a frozen portrait of Grace. But I could feel the heat of her fury radiating off her. The screen behind us flickered, the Winterbridge logo dissolving. It was not replaced by a neat summary graphic of the winning bid. Instead, a stark, black screen filled with lines of white and green text appeared. It was a raw server log. The audience murmured, confused, but Marla knew exactly what she was looking at. "This," I announced, my voice amplified throughout the massive marquee, "is the real-time log of the bidding process you just witnessed. As you can see, the tender was officially open to the public at 9:16 p.m. However, the winning bid from Angel Plows LLC was submitted nearly 2 minutes prior." I used the laser pointer from the podium to circle the two conflicting timestamps. An impossible feat, unless one had prior knowledge of the tender. A nervous ripple went through the crowd. This was no longer a celebration. Marla took a step closer to me. The smile was gone, utterly. Her face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. "Turn it off, Ivy," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss that only I could hear. I ignored her. I swiped to the next screen on my tablet. A new set of logs appeared, showing 2 distinct logins to the secure bidding portal. Furthermore, the bid was initiated from an IP address hardwired to the CFO's office. But the final approval, the one that fast-tracked the bid and authorized the payment guarantee, came from a different source. I highlighted the source. The user ID was displayed in large, undeniable letters on the giant screen. M. Vale Ops. This approval was routed through a mobile LTE network from a secondary, non-official user account. An account, I might add, that has been used to approve every single invoice from Angel Plows LLC, Halo Haulage Inc., and Cherub Clearance Co. for the past 18 months. Marla's control finally broke. She lunged forward, not toward the podium, but toward me. Her fingers, strong and cold, clamped down on my forearm like a vice. "That's enough," she seethed, her lips a thin, white line. "Marla," I said, my voice dangerously calm, my eyes locked on hers. "I'm simply upholding the Winterbridge corporate bylaws. Section 7, Article 4. Any executive officer found to be engaging in transactions with an entity in which they hold a direct or indirect beneficial interest, without full prior disclosure to the board, shall be in violation of the company's ethics clause." The legalistic precision of the words seemed to stun her for a second. The room was deathly quiet now. The only sound was the incessant, angry rattling of the wind and snow against the marquee's vinyl walls. Everyone was watching us, a tableau of silent, violent conflict. Her grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my cheek. You listen to me, she spat, her voice a low, guttural snarl of pure hatred. This girl has been a liar since she was a child. She invents stories. She always has. She didn't realize. In my role as presenter, the tech crew had fitted me with a small, discreet lapel microphone. It was still on. It was still live. Her words, intended as a private, vicious attack, were broadcast to every corner of the hall. A collective, audible gasp swept through the audience. Her private venom was now public record. For a heartbeat, seeing the dawning horror in the eyes of the people in the front row, she understood what she had done, but it was too late for retreat. Panic and fury ignited in her eyes. She reacted not as a CEO, but as a cornered animal. She shoved me. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a hard, violent thrust from the shoulder, a desperate attempt to physically silence me. I was caught off balance. My heel caught on a cable, and I stumbled backward, my hip slamming hard against the sharp corner of the lectern before I crumpled to the stage floor in a heap. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and heavy. It was broken by the sudden, frantic flashing of a dozen cell phone cameras. The jazz band had stopped playing. The waiters had stopped serving. Every single person in the room was frozen, staring at the scene, the celebrated CEO standing over the fallen body of her stepdaughter. Near the front, I saw Arthur Sterling and Eleanor Albright staring, their faces pale with shock. Next to them, the company's general counsel, a quiet, meticulous man named David Chen, leaned in and whispered something to them. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew what they were. The final nail. He was simply stating the facts, the cold, hard letter of the law that Marla, in her rage, had forgotten. Public display of violence, assault in a corporate setting, that's a non-discretionary trigger for immediate suspension pending investigation. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up. My hip throbbed, a deep, angry ache. I stood, brushing myself off, my composure an act of sheer will. I looked at Marla. Her face was a canvas of shock and dawning realization. The trap had not just been financial, it had been psychological. I knew that beneath the icy control was a well of uncontrollable rage. I had counted on it. I straightened my jacket and walked back to the podium. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked directly at Marla, and then I let my gaze sweep across the silent, horrified faces of the entire room. It seems, I said, my voice resonating with a cold, clear finality. Your angel just spilled some snow. The hall was a tomb. The only sound was the storm outside, howling and clawing at the windows, as if trying to get in. In the ringing silence that followed my words, the power on stage had already shifted. It was no longer Marla's. It was a vacuum, and I was prepared to fill it. I turned from Marla, whose face was a bloodless mask of disbelief, and addressed the two board members, Sterling and Albright, who were now standing by the edge of the stage, their expressions grim. Mr. Sterling, Ms. Albright, Mr. Hayes, I said, formally acknowledging the general counsel who had joined them. Given the clear violation of the corporate ethics clause and the public display of violence we have all just witnessed, I believe the bylaws are quite clear on the necessity for an immediate suspension of Ms. Vale Calder's duties as acting CEO and CFO. Hayes, the lawyer, gave a curt, decisive nod. That is correct. The board must convene an emergency session immediately. That won't be necessary, I said, my voice cutting through the procedural murmurs. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and produced a single, thick vellum envelope, sealed with the wax insignia of my father's personal law firm. My father anticipated a day might come when the company's operational integrity would be compromised. I handed the envelope to a stunned Arthur Sterling. He fumbled with the seal, his thick fingers clumsy with shock. He pulled out a multi-page legal document. Eleanor Albright read over his shoulder. "What is this?" she breathed, her eyes wide. "It is a legally binding directive." I explained for the benefit of everyone in the room. "It establishes an entity known as the Sunrise Trust. It was created by my father, Harold Calder, 5 years ago. It has a single specific activation clause." I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Marla watched me, her eyes narrowed to slits, a predator trying to find the flaw in the trap. "The trust is automatically activated," I continued, my voice resonating with the cold, hard authority of the law. "In the event that the acting chief financial officer is formally accused, with credible evidence, of engaging in self-dealing or transactions with a related party. Upon activation, the Trust's primary directive is to preserve the operational and ethical integrity of Winterbridge Logistics. To do so, it temporarily transfers the entirety of the Calder family's controlling voting shares into the hands of a single designated trustee." I let the implication hang in the air. Sterling looked up from the document, his face ashen. "The designated trustee is you, Ivy." A choked, incredulous laugh escaped Marla's lips. It was a raw, ugly sound. "This is absurd. A fantasy. You think some dusty piece of paper can override corporate law? There is no credible evidence, just a series of technical glitches and baseless accusations from a vindictive child." "On the contrary," I said, turning my tablet so the screen faced the board members, "the evidence is not only credible, it is confirmed." The screen lit up with a live video call. On it was the face of a stern, gray-haired man in a book-lined office. "Mr. Abramson," I said, "thank you for joining us." "Arthur, Eleanor," the man said, his voice a gravelly baritone that commanded respect. "I am speaking to you from my office in Boston. I have a notarized and time-stamped copy of the Sunrise Trust document in front of me. As Harold Calder's personal attorney for over 30 years, I can confirm that the signature is his, that he was of sound mind when he created it, and that he gave me very specific instructions regarding its activation. The evidence Ms. Calder has presented to me this evening more than satisfies the conditions he stipulated. As of my formal testimony, right now, the trust is active, per its terms. Ivy Calder is now the acting majority shareholder for the duration of the board's investigation." Marla stared at the screen, then at me, her mind clearly racing, searching for a counterattack. "This proves nothing," she finally spat, her voice rising in pitch. "It's a procedural trick. You still haven't shown a single piece of evidence that connects me to the finances of these phantom companies. You have no proof of a financial link. Without that, this is all just a spectacular, pathetic lie." She was right. The trust was activated by the accusation, but a conviction, both in the eyes of the board and the law, would require a clear money trail. She thought it was her final firewall. She had underestimated me. "The link is not as hidden as you think, Marla," I said softly. I gestured to the side of the stage, where a nervous-looking, middle-aged man in a rumpled suit was standing, clutching a briefcase. "I believe you all know Richard Hemlock, the chief accountant for Winterbridge." Hemlock walked hesitantly onto the stage, avoiding Marla's murderous glare. He opened his briefcase and handed a thin file to Eleanor Albright. "Ms. Albright," I said, "you are looking at a certified statement of account for the Halcyon Dawn Trust, the entity that capitalized all 3 of the Angel Shell companies. And beside it, you will see a copy of the wire transfer confirmation for the $25,000 payment guarantee that was sent to our bidding platform's payment processor just 20 minutes ago." Albright's eyes scanned the pages, her finger tracing a line. "The account numbers. They match. The payment for the bid guarantee came directly from the same trust that created the company that won the bid." "And who is the sole signatory on that trust? Mr. Hemlock?" I asked. Hemlock swallowed hard, still not looking at Marla. "The sole trustee and signatory is Ms. Marla Vale Calder." The final crucial link snapped into place. It was a closed loop of fraud, funded by her, paid by her, and received by her. Arthur Sterling, his face a mask of cold fury, spoke up. "And we," he said, his voice booming with a newfound authority, "Ms. Albright and I witnessed the manipulation of the bidding process with our own eyes, in real time. We witnessed the bid being submitted before the system was even open. The evidence was overwhelming, a complete, multi-layered, and irrefutable picture of systematic fraud. Marla was trapped, the walls of her own elaborate lies closing in on her. She looked from the board members' condemnatory faces to the accountant's averted eyes, to the lawyer's face on the screen, and finally, to me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. I reached for the trust document in Sterling's hand and turned to the last page. There, below my father's signature, was a single sentence. Handwritten in his familiar, strong script, I held it up. "There's one last thing you should all know," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I had suppressed for far too long. I took a deep breath, and the words that came out were not just a legal directive, but the echo of a promise made between a father and a daughter. It says, "The day you prove that snow can't hide footprints, you lead." The words fell into the silence of the room. This was never just about business. It was a test, a long, painful 20-year test. And I had finally passed. Marla flinched as if I had struck her. For the first time since I had known her, the mask of supreme confidence shattered completely, replaced by the raw, naked look of defeat. She took a half-step backward, an involuntary retreat. For the first time in her life, she was standing in the open, with no secrets, no shadows, and no snow to hide behind. And she could see no way out. The legal and financial arguments were complete. The trap was sprung, the crime was proven. But I wasn't finished. The fraud, the theft, the corporate malfeasance, that was all just the symptom. I needed to expose the disease. I needed everyone in that room, everyone who had ever admired her poise or feared her power, to understand where it all began. I turned back to the podium and picked up my tablet. My hands were perfectly steady. "There is one more piece of this story," I said, my voice dropping, becoming more intimate, drawing the silent room in closer. The name Marla chose for her shell companies, Angel, Halo, Cherub, it wasn't random. It was a message, a private joke that started a very long time ago. I swiped the screen, and the server logs and bank statements vanished from the massive display behind me. They were replaced by a single, stark, black and white image. It was the county drone photograph from 21 years ago. The image of Aspen Lane, a street of quiet houses sleeping under a blanket of new snow. With a tap, I zoomed in on the backyard of my childhood home. I drew a slow, deliberate red circle around the area behind the shed. The two shadows, one large, one small. The chaotic, disturbed snow. This photograph was taken the morning after the first heavy snow of that winter. I began, my voice a quiet, clear narrative in the cavernous space. It was taken as part of a residential plowing pilot program, a project initiated and approved by the then-new CFO, Marla Vale, a project my father never even knew existed. I looked directly at Marla. She stood frozen, her face a blank slate, as if she could will herself invisible by sheer force of will. "The day before this photo was taken," I continued, my gaze unwavering, "Marla invited me outside to make snow angels. I was 8 years old. It was a new and exciting idea, but she led me to this spot, behind the shed, where no one from the neighboring houses could see. There, she told me that our bonding was an obligation, a tiresome chore. When I tried to play with my new plastic shovel, she took it from me and broke it in half over her knee. She told me that cheap things break, and then she left me there. I let the simple, unadorned facts settle in the silence. There was no anger in my voice, no self-pity, just the cold, flat recitation of a memory polished smooth by 2 decades of silent repetition. I didn't make an angel. I fell back into the snow, stunned. That is the disturbance you see circled in red, the proof of a promise broken. It was the first time she used the snow as a cover. It was the first time an angel became a lie. I turned my attention to the company's fleet manager, George, the man I had spoken to on the phone, who was standing near the back of the room. "George, could you please come forward?" He shuffled onto the stage, a deer in the headlights. Arthur Sterling gestured for him to come to the podium. "Mr. Hemlock," Sterling said, his voice now a low growl of command. "Can you confirm the origins of this pilot program?" George cleared his throat, nodding. "Yes, sir. I remember it. We were told to add Aspen Lane to a new route. The directive came from the CFO's office. Said a neighbor had complained that a child had fallen in the snow and the family was sensitive. We were told this was a community goodwill initiative to smooth things over. Seemed like a lot of fuss over one kid." "A child falls," I said, picking up the narrative thread, "and a corporate pilot program is born to cover the incident. The incident is logged in the board minutes as handled internally, and a precedent is set. A small private cruelty is laundered through corporate procedure, sanitized into a line item, and this is where the code was born." I looked at the chief accountant, Richard Hemlock. "Mr. Hemlock, please tell the board what the internal designation angel was used for in the discretionary budget." Hemlock flinched, but he answered, his voice barely a whisper. It was a legacy code for sensitive, off-the-books expenses, things that couldn't be easily categorized, consulting fees, discretionary bonuses, settlement payments. We were told it stood for the Aspen Lane Goodwill Initiative, the first project it was ever used for. It became the standard code for anything that needed to be kept quiet. The final piece clicked into place. The room let out a collective, soft sigh of understanding. The name wasn't a joke. It was a system, an accounting code for her secrets, born in our backyard and scaled up to embezzle millions. The personal had become the financial. "You created a budget line item out of a child's disillusionment," I said, speaking directly to Marla now. "You took a moment of private cruelty and turned it into a corporate strategy. But you made one mistake. You left behind a piece of evidence. You see, after you broke my shovel and told me cheap things deserve to be broken, you ordered a full corporate recall of the entire product line, citing a manufacturing defect." I walked to the evidence table I had set up, where my laptop and the Sunrise Trust document lay. I picked up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a shard of jagged red plastic. "You issued a disposal order for every shovel with the lot number K88B1, I said, holding up the bag. I then held up a laminated copy of the original procurement receipt and the disposal order she had signed. The lot number was clearly visible on both. "This piece of plastic has been in a box in my closet for 21 years. It is a piece of the shovel you broke. It is from lot K88B1. It is physical proof that the incident you covered up with a corporate recall, the incident that created your secret slush fund, happened exactly as I said it did." I placed the bag on the podium with a soft, final click. The evidence was complete. The story was told. The silence in the room was now thick with something else. Shame. From the crowd of employees, a senior manager, a woman who had been with the company since the beginning, bowed her head. Her voice was choked with emotion when she spoke. Not to me, but to the room at large. We heard rumors. We thought it was a family matter." Her words, meant as a confession, were the most damning indictment of all. They were the excuse that had allowed all of this to happen. The willful blindness, the polite turning away. I looked at her, and then at all of them. the people who had worked for my father, who had enabled her reign through their silence. It was a family matter, I said, my voice resonating with a sudden, fierce power. And because you all called it a family matter, it was allowed to become a budget line. Because you looked away from the cruelty in the home. You missed the crime in the office. They were never separate. They were one and the same. Marla stood alone, an island in the sea of judgment. She looked small. The power, the poise, the aura of untouchable authority had been stripped away, layer by layer, until all that was left was the cold, petty tyrant who had broken a child's toy in the snow. I glanced out through the vast glass wall of the marquee. The snow was coming down harder now, thick, fat flakes swirling in the wind, plastering themselves against the panes. It was a blizzard, a genuine whiteout. But it didn't matter how hard it fell. From where I stood, high on this stage, in the unforgiving glare of the lights, I could see everything clearly. There wasn't enough snow in the world to cover this. The silence on the stage was no longer a void. It was a vessel, now filled with the cold, hard weight of legal certainty. The storm of emotion had passed, and the clinical work of judgment was about to begin. Arthur Sterling, his face set like granite, was the first to act. He stepped forward, not addressing the stunned crowd, but speaking directly to the general counsel, his voice a low command. Mr. Hayes, in my capacity as lead independent director, I am calling an emergency session of the Board of Directors of Winterbridge Logistics, effective immediately, right here, right now. I second the motion, Eleanor Albright said, her voice sharp and brittle. The motion is carried, Hayes replied, his tone devoid of any emotion. He was no longer an advisor. He was an instrument of corporate law. He turned to the other board members scattered in the front rows. A quorum is present. The session is now open. Sterling looked directly at Marla, who stood as if rooted to the floor, a statue of disgraced power. I move for the immediate and indefinite suspension of Marla Vale Calder from all duties, titles, and responsibilities as Acting Chief Executive Officer and Chief Financial Officer, and from any and all roles associated with this corporation, pending the outcome of a full, independent forensic audit to be conducted by an outside firm. I second the motion, Albright repeated, the words like hammer blows. All in favor? Sterling asked. A chorus of ayes came from the board members. There were no nays. There was no debate. It was an execution, swift and bloodless. The motion is passed unanimously, Hayes announced. Ms. Vale Calder, you are hereby suspended. Your access to all company property, systems, and accounts is revoked, effective immediately. He nodded to the head of corporate security, a large, stoic man who had moved to the side of the stage. Please escort Ms. Vale Calder from the premises. Marla didn't move. She simply stared at me, her eyes burning with a silent, helpless fury. Hayes continued, his voice a relentless engine of consequence. Furthermore, I am directing the Audit Committee to prepare a comprehensive report of all findings. This report, including the evidence of self-dealing, bid rigging, and fiduciary misconduct presented here tonight, will be delivered to the County Prosecutor's Office by close of business tomorrow. Winterbridge Logistics will cooperate fully with any and all ensuing criminal investigations. The words hung in the air, each one a stone being laid on the lid of her coffin. This was not just a corporate coup, it was the prelude to a criminal indictment. While the machinery of her downfall ground on, the real world, the world of snow and ice and 18-wheelers, was still in crisis. I turned to George, the fleet manager, who still stood awkwardly on the stage. George, I said, my voice cutting through the legal proceedings, crisp and operational. Activate the Tier 1 emergency weather protocol. I want every available Winterbridge plow and salt truck deployed immediately. The hubs in Westvale, Northgate, and Silver Creek are top priority. I also want you to contact our vetted Tier 1 auxiliary contractors, McPherson Hauling and Granite State Plowing. Offer them triple rates for immediate deployment. I am assuming emergency operational command under the provisions of the Sunrise Trust, and I am authorizing all necessary overtime and surge pricing. Get our trucks rolling. Now. For a second, he just stared at me, then at the board members, then at the suspended CEO. Hayes gave a curt nod. Ms. Calder's authority is absolute in this matter. Follow her instructions. Something shifted in George's eyes. The confusion was replaced by the familiar spark of a problem solver given a clear mission. He pulled out his phone, already barking orders into it as he strode off the stage. This is George. Get dispatch on the line. I want every driver on the emergency roster called in. My actions seemed to break the spell that had held the room captive. The legal drama was over, and the work of the company was beginning again, under new leadership, and that's when the sound started. It began as a tentative, scattered patter, like the first drops of rain. A few hands in the back of the room, then a few more in the middle. It was the sound of applause. It grew, not into a wave of adulation, but into a steady, rolling thunder of profound and cathartic relief. It was the sound of a long-held breath being released. People rose to their feet, their faces a complex tapestry of emotions. Some were crying openly, tears of vindication streaming down their faces. Others, the ones who had been with the company for decades, simply looked down at the floor, a quiet shame in their eyes for the silence they had kept for so long. They were not applauding me, not really. They were applauding the end of a long, cold winter. The two security guards approached Marla. They were polite, professional, their presence a quiet but unyielding wall. Ma'am, the first one said softly, we need you to come with us. She finally moved. Her body seemed to deflated, the rigid, arrogant posture collapsing inward. She took a step, then another, walking the longest 10 yards of her life across the stage that was meant to be her triumph. As she reached the edge, she stopped. She turned back, her eyes scanning the room, the faces of the people who had once feared her now watching her with a mixture of pity and contempt. She tried to smile. It was a ghastly, horrifying effort. The muscles in her face strained to replicate the familiar, angelic curve of her lips. But it was a broken thing, a twitching, spastic death mask of the smile she had used as both a shield and a weapon for so long. It held for a moment, a grotesque parody of warmth, before it crumbled. Her eyes found mine one last time. In them, I saw no remorse, no understanding, only the barren, desolate landscape of her own ruin. I took a step toward her, and the applause quieted. I spoke, my voice not carrying through the microphone, but just loud enough for her to hear. Stop trying to be an angel, Marla, I said. Be human. It was the cruelest thing I could have said, because being human meant feeling shame, regret, and consequence, all the things she had spent her life trying to rise above. She flinched, and then she was gone, escorted out a side exit into the fury of the storm she could no longer control. In the aftermath, the marquee felt like a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. People talked in hushed, excited tones. The communications director, a woman Marla had hired, approached me, her face pale. What should I tell the press? The truth, I said. Issue a statement. Winterbridge Logistics has initiated a change in executive leadership. We are recommitting to a future of complete operational and financial transparency for our employees, our clients, and our community. Keep it simple. The rest will tell itself. I looked down at the stage floor. Sometime during the chaos, someone had tracked in a clump of snow on their boot. Now, under the hot stage lights, it was gone. All that remained was a small, glistening puddle of perfectly clear, clean water. reflecting the bright lights from above like a tiny, shattered mirror. The lie had melted away, leaving only the truth. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I didn't watch the quiet conversations, the nervous glances, the slow, dawning realization of a new era settling over the room. I didn't need to. The work was done. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the marquee and stepped out into the night. The transition was a physical shock. The air inside had been hot and suffocating, thick with tension and the smell of perfume and catered food. Out here, the air was clean and sharp and achingly cold. The storm was in full force, a wild, untamed thing of wind and blinding white. The sounds of the gala were instantly swallowed by the roar of the blizzard, leaving only the howl of the wind and the soft, percussive hiss of snow hitting the ground. The snow was already deep, well past my ankles, a pristine and untracked blanket covering the vast executive parking lot. The neat rows of expensive cars were now just soft, white mounds, their sharp edges erased by the storm. I walked away from the warm, yellow glow of the marquee, my footsteps the first to mar the perfect surface, each step a deep, satisfying crunch. The wind tore at my hair and stung my cheeks, so cold it felt like a physical blow. But I welcomed it. It was real. It was clean. I walked to the very center of the parking lot, to a wide, open space between the anonymous white humps of buried sedans. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the snow collect on my shoulders and in my hair, tilting my head back to feel the flakes melt against my face. There was no one here, no audience, no board members, no cameras except for one. I glanced up at the corner of the main building, where a small, dark dome was mounted on the wall, the security camera, a single, dispassionate, unblinking eye, recording it all under the sickly, orange-yellow glare of the sodium vapor lamps. The light flattened everything, bleaching the color from the world and casting long, strange shadows. It was a perfect, silent stage. Slowly, deliberately, I lay down. I fell straight back into the deep, soft powder, the cold a sudden, shocking embrace through the thin fabric of my jacket. It seeped through instantly, but I didn't care. I stared up into the chaotic swirl of the storm, into the heart of the darkness from which the snow was born. There were no stars. There was no moon. There was only the storm and the silence and the cold. I spread my arms wide, then began to move them, slowly, rhythmically, up and down. I felt the crisp resistance of the snow, the satisfying scrape as my hands carved out the shape of a wing. I moved my legs, separating them and bringing them back together, creating the angel's gown. The movements were not the frantic, playful motions of a child. They were measured, graceful, almost ceremonial. This was not a game. It was a ritual. I was not making a snow angel. I was exorcising a ghost. I was taking back the word. I was taking back the snow. When I was finished, I lay still for a long moment, a perfect, symmetrical impression in the white canvas of the world. Then, carefully, so as not to disturb the image I had made, I sat up, then pushed myself to my feet. I stood over it, my breath pluming in the frigid air. It was perfect, a flawless angel, its wings spread wide, lying in silent repose under the watchful eye of the camera. The first angel I had ever made, the only one that mattered. An angel of my own creation, born not of a lie or a command, but of a quiet, deliberate act of will. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a low, vibrating hum against my leg. I pulled it out, my fingers clumsy with cold. A new text message was on the screen. It was from Abramson, my father's lawyer. The words were simple, stripped of all legal jargon, just the cold, hard facts. Sunrise Trust now controls all Calder voting shares. Your position is secure. The company is stable. I read the message once, then twice. It was over. Really over. I navigated to my photo gallery, to the folder where I kept my evidence. I found the first file in the sequence, the one that had started it all. The close-up of Marla's triumphant, lying smile. Angel.png. My thumb hovered over the delete button. I didn't need it anymore. The image was no longer a weapon. It was just a picture of a sad, broken woman. I pressed delete. A small confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this item? I pressed yes. The image vanished. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked up. My gaze fell upon the dark, smoked glass facade of the Winterbridge headquarters. The lights from the parking lot cast a faint reflection on its surface. I could see myself, a dark, solitary figure standing in the swirling snow. And there, at my feet, was another reflection. Fainter, but still clear. The pale, outstretched wings of the angel I had made. The two images hung there for a moment in the glass, separate but connected. A woman and her ghost, the past and the present, finally at peace. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked toward the edge of the parking lot, toward the road, my footsteps leaving a straight, determined line away from the building, away from the marquee, away from the past. The camera stayed where it was, its unblinking eye focused on the center of the frame, where a single, perfect angel lay alone in the snow, its wings spread wide as if ready to take flight, waiting for the storm to eventually, inevitably, cover it up. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd love to connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and liking the video. And it would mean the world to me if you also hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.